less. And usually it has a seasonal pattern because the hygiene gets worse when the water is less, or when there is when we have monsoon. Where there is mixing of the fecal material and the water which we use for our drinking purpose, or which we commonly use. And also it reflects, the foodborne also reflects the eating habits. So if you take more of foods which allow the growth of foodborne pathogens, then definitely you get more. So usually we say that, the meat and the fish products, they are more prone to allow the growth of, because they are nutritionally much superior, they allow the growth of foodborne pathogens. So when you take the foodborne illness, you can see that 1 out of 10 people in the whole world fall ill every year because of the seafood. I would say foodborne illness, not seafood, but foodborne illness. And we lose around 33 million healthy life years every year. So that means, I think India contributes around 17.5% of the population. So definitely we lose around 5 to 6 million of the healthy life years every year. So that means we lose a lot of time because of the foodborne illness. And many of these could have been avoided. And we can see here that the foodborne illness results in death of around 4.2 lakh people world over. And the most pertinent thing is that 1/3 of the death is contributed by children. So they are more prone to this foodborne illness. So can we call the food poisoning as a disease of our times? Because people who are above 50 here, they will definitely say that when we were young, we rarely got any food poisoning. That was, we rarely hear about, because basically we eat from home, we prepare it, and maybe once we prepare it, we finish off all the food, what is there, or we maybe whatever is left over, we'll just throw it away. We won't reuse it. But nowadays we see that there is a lot of cases of food poisoning. So is it because of more efficient reporting? Because definitely because of the increase in the technology, because of the more efficient systems what we have in place, because of softwares we have, is it because that there is more efficient reporting? Or is it because of the development in sciences? Because you know that a lot of diagnostic kits have come, diagnostic aids have come. So we tend to maybe diagnose it much easier. Or is it because of the food handling and storage practice? As I was telling, earlier we used to throw away whatever food is left over, but nowadays we tend to store the food. So is that the reason? Or it's a combination of all this, or maybe because of the increase in the number of people who have impaired immune function, especially the old people, or the people who are sick. And is it because that they are more in number nowadays? So this can be, all this might have contributed to the large number of food poisoning cases in the current scenario. So some of the major risk factors are the improper holding temperatures. We know that nowadays, when you take the domestic refrigerator, you know that the temperatures, we are supposed to hold temperature below, the food below 4 degrees centigrade. But if you really check the temperature of our refrigerators, it will be anything between 8 to 10. So that means it allows the growth of many of the bacteria. Or even if you take the freezers, we are supposed to store the 20 degrees centigrade in freezers. But when you really check the temperature, it will be something like -8 to -10. So that is the usual condition here. Sometimes what happens is we go to the seafood factories here, and I would like to share a story where we went to a factory where they have a store, a cold store. So they were supposed to store the seafood at -20 degrees centigrade. So they had 3 different temperature monitors kept at 3 different places. So to our surprise, all these were showing different temperatures. One was showing -18, one was showing us -20, one was showing us -22. But when we really took out a sample from there, a food sample from there, and we checked the temperature, it was -16. So that means we don't properly hold the temperatures even in a very highly organized sector. So what will happen to other organized sectors? Sometimes what happens is when we know that when we purchase food from supermarket, they switch off the freezers in the night. So the holding temperature is one of the major issues for food poisoning. And then preparing food ahead of schedule. So sometimes we know that when you go for marriages and all, sometimes they start preparing 2 to 3 days ahead. And then definitely that is a cause. That is one of the reasons where when you go to large functions, you have more chances of getting an infection. Of course, pure personal hygiene, that has been discussed frequently nowadays, especially when you take Kerala, when nowadays people say that when you go to restaurants and all, the personal hygiene is drastically reduced because of various reasons. And inadequate cooking. Sometimes what happens is because we are in a rush, so we don't tend to, so the core temperature, the temperature in the core of the food material may not reach the temperature which is required to the death of the bacteria or maybe the pathogen. So that may result in the bacteria still present there. And inadequate cleaning and disinfecting of the equipment. Sometimes we know that pathogens like Listeria monocytogenes, they can form biofilms. And then if the equipment which we use for food preparation is not properly cleaned, Listeria monocytogenes can stick on there. Recently, we have a study here where we were trying to find out the prevalence of Listeria monocytogenes in the fish. So we found that the fish hold in the boats, they are a very good source of Listeria here. So that means if you don't clean the food contact surfaces properly, there is every chance that you get foodborne illness. There is also this chance of cross contamination. So many times you read in newspapers or maybe see in TVs wherein wherever you store the fish or the meat, the same place you store the vegetables or the ice cream. So there is every chance that there is cross contamination between these sources. And of course, the contaminated raw material, if it is left aside, and then if it is taken later, then that can also result in food poisoning. Okay, please, Chair, I would like you to remind me the time so that I can just finish off on time. So some of the special issues we take in developing countries, especially, is that we started recognizing the importance of food safety only very recently. We know that FSSAI has been, we see that nowadays there is a lot of raids happening in Kerala, in the restaurants and other places. So that means there is a lot of awareness which is created. There is a lot of awareness about food safety nowadays. Maybe a few years back, that was not the in our country. But then in few places, like if you go to the interior areas of the country, we see that. Yeah, so if you see that when you go to the interior places of the countries, we still see that food safety is not recognized as a major issue. There is little consumer awareness in many places. I mean, people are happy with the very cheap food, and they are not very interested in the quality, or the safety of the food. And when you see the food processing units, it's in very small and unorganized sectors. So I'll just like to share about my story. When I was here, I tried to take, because one of the popular drinks is soda, which is impregnated with carbonated drink, which is made locally. So once I was feeling very thirsty, and then just went to a shop and had just a soda with lime. And then the next day onwards, I started having diarrhea. So then I was just discussing with my colleagues. They were telling that that's a major issue here, because these are all in small and unorganized sector. There is nobody to control them, and so because of that, they don't take sufficient importance to the food safety. Also, the food handlers, they're not at all trained. When you see any place, you go to any restaurants, you just go to the restaurants of any restaurants and see the food handlers, how they handle the food. I think that deserves a lot of improvement. And of course, in a place like India, you have a lot of food products or cuisines which is available, and then developing a standard operating practice or something, it's very difficult. And of course, we have inadequate laboratory and testing infrastructure. We have very few laboratories which can test this food for the presence of any pathogens or any other toxins. Also, we tend to eat from the street, and that is one of the common places where you get foodborne illness. So when you take the foodborne outbreaks in US, you can see that the norovirus that contributes maximum to around, when you take from 2009 to 2015, you see that norovirus contributed in 2009 and all. But then Salmonella has slowly increased, and Listeria monocytogenes. So Salmonella and Listeria monocytogenes, you can see that of late they are the major pathogens in US. When you take the number of hospitalizations in the US, in the US, you can see that between 2009 and 2015, you can see that there were around 900 outbreaks every year on an average. It slowly started increasing from 2009, and then it has reached almost 900 outbreaks per year. It's not about seafood outbreaks alone, but we take the total number of outbreaks. Sorry, it's not. Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So because I was not able to shift my slide, so I thought some problem. Yeah.
Okay.
When you take the foodborne disease, yeah. So now, if you take the foodborne outbreaks in India, you can see that we don't have a proper system in place. When you take from for maybe 26 years, you can see that there were only 32 outbreaks which has been reported, and only 2,200 individuals has been affected because of this. So we know that this is gross underreporting. There may be various reasons to this, and this is from the Department of Health Services. So this is an authentic report. So we can just see that how much underreporting is there with regard to the foodborne outbreaks in India. But then World Bank report says that the foodborne diseases cost India around 15 billion US dollars every year. So that is the amount of loss we incur every year because of the foodborne outbreaks. If you take the important seafood pathogens, these are all of us know, but then I'm just brushing through this. These are the major seafood-borne pathogens which we normally encounter. And so broadly, the seafood-borne illnesses can be broadly classified as those one classification space. These pathogens can come from the aquatic or general environment. So these are listed here. If you see Parahemolyticus, cholera vulnificus, any of the Vibrio species, they are autochthonous, that means they are really present in the aquatic environment and enters into the seafood, and then that causes infection. So any Vibrios, but then if you see Vibrio parahemolyticus and Vibrio cholerae, only few of the serotypes, they can cause disease. So they are autochthonous. They are very well present in the environment in which the fishes grow. Yeah. So again, Listeria monocytogenes, even though it is put in aquatic and general environment, it comes in the other category also, which we'll be discussing later. So, and again, Clostridium botulinum type E, it is present in the aquatic environment. Clostridium botulinum type B, it is present in the soil. So you can see that many of these pathogens are already present in the aquatic or general environment, and which enters into the fish, and then that causes us the disease. So these are some of the pathogens which has an animal or a human reservoir. Salmonella, Shigella, Yersinia, E. coli. All of us know about all this. So you can see that Shigella, the minimum infectious dose is very less, 10 raised to 1 to 10 raised to -2. So it's very low in number. Oh, sorry.
Sir, kindly click the PowerPoint and then click the next button.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as we were already telling, there are two types of foodborne illness. One is the infection, and infection usually occurs by the injection of the microbes in the food, or illness is caused by the invasion of the bacteria or the pathogen in the gut or the body, and also it can be also due to the toxin production in the GI tract. So there are two ways by which infection cause disease. We have intoxication also, where the toxin is already formed outside the body, and then once you consume the fish or the food material, and then we get the symptoms or the disease. So that is another form. So when you take so one of the major issues which we face is that we have to find even very low amounts of the pathogens, very low amounts of the bacteria which is present in the seafood should be effectively detected so that we don't carry it over to the consumer or the customer. So there are various challenges we face that prevent us from the detection of these pathogens in the food. One of the things is that if you take, because normally what happens is when you go to a very big establishment, food processing establishment, the food is processed in large quantities, maybe in tons. So again, the question comes: how will you sample this? How will you take the sample? Because even if you take a pathogen, you will be hardly taking 10 or 50 grams. That's the maximum you take, or maybe 100 grams, not more than that. So when we take the sample, whether it represents the actual food which we take, so that is one challenge we're definitely going to change, because some part of it, maybe because we are taking the food from different places, and so there can be an uneven distribution of the pathogens in the food. Also that there can be indigenous microbes which is present in the food that makes the identification of the pathogens be difficult, because what happens is, even you take fish, the limit of the pathogens which can be present in the fish is kept around 10 raised to 7. So 10 raised to 7 is around 10 million. That's 1 crore per gram. So that means we should be able to detect a pathogen from among the 1 crore different pathogens. So that is a big challenge, because we have a lot of other bacteria which is present, the background bacteria which is present, and we have to pick up those bacteria which is relevant to us. And also the heterogeneous nature of the food matrix, because there will be a lot of mixing of the food, and then that makes the food analysis a little bit difficult. Also the time and sensitivity analysis. Sometimes what happens is we get the food and then maybe we may not have the time. So when we analyze it the next day, things will change, because some food has to be analyzed, especially the food which is chilled. It has to be analyzed then and there when middle of the analysis is there. So because we tend to know it there itself, because otherwise if we keep food for a long time, what happens is the background flora will go over, and then that will result in poor results. And there can be always human errors, and also there is a lot of labor cost which is involved in this test. Human errors, why I said is because the person behind the test is very important, because even though we get a protocol, we just follow the protocol, because all of us know that, who has worked in the lab know that even though we follow a protocol, we may not get the same results always. So the person who is behind the test is very important. So even the input which goes, the media which we use, the purity of the chemicals which we use, they are very important from the point of view of the food analysis. So when we compare, because the best comparisons between the clinical microbiology and food microbiology, we see that in food microbiology, the bacteria which we target or the pathogen we target are present in very low numbers. Also, you see that they are sometimes injured because of the processing. Sometimes it is frozen, or sometimes it can go to a viable but non-culturable state, so where you will not be able to pick up. Or it can be sometimes that the multiplication will be very slow in food, even though it is present, but when it enters into a body, then the multiplication becomes very fast. And food matrix interference, we have already discussed, and the competing flora is very high. So when we compare with clinical microbiology, food microbiology is much more tougher to get the results. So some of the methods which we normally use for detection of pathogenic bacteria are the conventional phenotypic methods, where we use the conventional media and then followed by different biochemical tests to identify a pathogen. And that is still considered valid. Then this has been supported always with immunological methods like ELISA or different other methods, maybe antibody tests, antibody tests. So that is always a supporting test. But many of the tests which we use still follows the traditional microbiological method or the traditional method of the culture method we use. And also, of late, we have been using molecular methods for identification of different pathogens because that is much more easier. But then that cannot replace the biochemical test, because what happens is the molecular tests, they are not very foolproof when it comes to identifying the pathogens. So always, the molecular method should be supported with biochemical methods for identification of any pathogens. So when we take the conventional culture methods, they are still considered as the gold standard. They are widely used method, and they are considered as a gold standard for the detection of foodborne pathogens. And they are the most accurate and reliable. Even now, even when you take regulatory agencies like FDA or FSSA, or for that matter, any regulatory agencies all throughout the world, they still follow the traditional conventional method compared to the molecular methods, though there are many methods which has been developed and which has been very widely used in research, but not for the detection of the pathogens when you consider from the regulatory point of view. But then traditional methods has undergone certain degree of mechanization, or where things have become better. We use, all of us know that we can use chemical blender, we can use spiral platers. That makes our life easy when we use the traditional methods. That can make things faster. Maybe that can help us to analyze more number of samples. But then still we have to follow all those incubation time, temperature, all this has to be followed. But the only thing is maybe our work, maybe the workload, in terms of workload, that has drastically reduced when we use these kits. There are many different others. Maybe I have listed few of them, but then there are many others available. And then maybe we can use depending on whether it is used for research purpose or whether it has been approved by regulatory agencies. So, or maybe you can even think of maybe even 3M Petri film. That is something which has been approved by many of the regulatory agencies that can be very well used for detection of the pathogens. So there are some improvements in the traditional methods. Then that, of course, they are not completely replaced the traditional methods. The conventional methods, they have the limitations of specificity, sensitivity, and of course they are time consuming. If you take the detection of Salmonella, it takes at least 5 days for confirmation. You take E. coli, again 5 days. So it takes a lot of time for the confirmation test to come off. So I just remember one instance wherein one company in Kochi, they wanted to export a seafood, and then they did some. Because they were supposed to supply, I think, McDonald's or something in US, and then they're supposed to load the lot into the truck. They got the results, which was done in house. They had a doubt whether they had salmonella contamination in the breaded product. So it was a breaded and battered shrimp product. So what happened is they came to us, and then we told them that it's not approved, but then still we can try a PCR test. So what we did is we did a PCR test for confirmation of salmonella, and then we confirmed that it is salmonella. So that helped them to save another 5 days, because otherwise if they have to repeat, that means another 5 days would have gone. So they were saved 5 days, but then they couldn't transport those materials. But then they saved their face, because otherwise that'd be a big black mark for that. Because when the product goes there, it will be undergoing quality checks there, and then if they find that it is contaminated with salmonella, definitely, all their export orders will be cancelled. So that's safe. But then, so that's what I told the conventional diagnostic methods can be supported with molecular diagnostic methods, but cannot fully replace these conventional diagnostic methods. But when we compare these, we see that the rapid methods are much more sensitive because we'll be able to detect even very low numbers of pathogens, but they'll be a little more costly. They'll be less time consuming. As I was telling, Salmonella, we were able to do in a day, in one working day, 8 hours, we were able to finish Salmonella detection, but otherwise it would have taken 5 days. Less labor, definitely, because you just need to do a PCR or RT-PCR or whatever. But one of the major issues is that only very few methods have been approved by regulatory agencies. Because if, as far as the food safety is concerned, if a regulatory agency has to approve it before you use it for practical applications. So now I will just like to put across to you certain examples which we have done, some research which we have done in our laboratory based on the foodborne pathogens. So this is something which we have done in our laboratory. When we did, so this is part of a PhD of Dr. Murikadas. So he has doing PhD. So our aim was to find out the presence of MRSA, the methicillin-resistant staphylococcus in seafood. As all of us know, that's a big issue nowadays, the presence of MRSA in hospitals and community. So it's very rampant. I'm sure that is present in animals also. So when we really started the work, we don't have any protocols to really look out for MRSA, because for Staphylococcus aureus it was there, but then for MRSA it was not there. So we tried different methodologies, and then when we initially tried, the prevalence level of MRSA in seafood was 4.5%. But then when we used an improved, we found that the prevalence was increased to 13.4%. So whenever you use a method for, especially in research, for finding out the prevalence of pathogen, you have to standardize the protocol, because that is very important from the point of view of, because sometimes the pathogen may be present, but then the protocol which we use, the media which we use may not be good enough to detect that pathogen. So that is something which we have to be very careful. Also, sorry, again some issue. Yeah. So we tried a similar protocol for Shigella, isolation of Shigella from seafood, because as all of us know, because there is a lot of contamination. There will be definite contamination, because we get Salmonella, we get Yersinia, you get all of the pathogens, but then you see, Shigella also should be there, because it's of either animal origin or human origin, it should be there. But then what we found is that we were not able to standardize a protocol for the presence of Shigella in aquatic species or even the seafood. So we failed when we tried to inoculate directly into seafood and check for this person, because this is a zero tolerance pathogen, because the infectious dose is 10 raised to 1. That means even 10 bacteria is there, you'll be able to cause a disease. So we tried this, but then we couldn't standardize the protocol for finding out the prevalence of Shigella in seafood. So these are some of the issues which we really face when we try to find out the presence of pathogens in seafood. So this was an outbreak which we found in, as you know, Edwardsella tarda. It causes infection in human beings as well as in fishes. So this was an infection which we got in Kodungalur. So this was a punctaceous farm, a catfish farm. So we found some lesions, and then we checked. Then we found that the presence of this pathogen in that species. So what normally happens is, maybe when we take, when we really consume the fish, because we'll be adding all the spices which are all good and which has good antibacterial potential. But then the people who handle this fish inside the aquaculture farm, or maybe people who caught this fish, they have a chance of getting the infection if the fish is already infected. Because we found that in the fish, it is present in very large numbers. The Edwards latada was present in very large numbers. So that can definitely be transferred into human beings when we handle the fish. May not be that when we consume the fish because we cook it before we consume, or maybe from the aquaculture farm, as I was telling. This is another interesting thing which we have found. Normally, Vibrio cholera, they are not found to be pathogenic to shrimps as a whole. But then one of the farmers came to our laboratory and they said that there was mortality in a shrimp farm. And then we checked for the presence of pathogens in that. We checked for the different viruses which affect shrimp. And later on, we could isolate the Vibrio cholerae in very large numbers. And then we did a serotyping of that. We found that it is Vibrio cholerae 0139, which is a pathogenic strain and which has cholera toxin in it. So we found the prevalence of cholera toxin also. And it was able to, we did an experimental inoculation. We found that it was able to infect the other species of shrimp. So this is a very serious issue because what happens is that here, this is a human pathogen. You see a human pathogen which is not able to produce disease in fish earlier, but now we find that they are able to produce disease in fish, and then once it multiplies in the aquaculture environment, because it is infecting the fish, it remains in the aquaculture environment, and maybe it can contaminate with the drinking water, or maybe it can contaminate with any other food, and then maybe there's every chance that we get infection. But then we were not able to trace it because that's not part of our study. But then the thing is that Vibrio cholera 0139 is able to infect shrimps also. So that means many pathogens which were earlier not infective to fish or shrimp, they are now found to be infective to those animals. This is again another study which we did. We found that Vibrio parahelminthecus, of course, it produces infection in shrimp. But then this is the first time that we are reporting a TDH carrying, a thermostable hemolysin carrying Vibrio parahelminthecus, which is pathogenic in human beings, producing infection in shrimp. So, and then we confirmed it, and then we found that, and this is the first report there. So again, like previously, as I was telling, even as in Vibrio cholera, Vibrio parahelminthecus pathogenic strains can cause infection in shrimp. So the major issue is that once the shrimp is infected, it dies, it remains in the water, and then the pathogen may spread to different places, and then that can always mix with our drinking water. So that is one issue we can always think of. This is one study which, this is again a PhD study which we did recently. We have seen the presence of Vibrio parahelminthecus against TDH positive. We found that from 100 samples, we got 29 Vibrio parahelminthecus which are Kanagawa positive. That means which can produce hemolysis and which are pathogens in human beings. And 17 of them, they are found to be TDH positive. That means they have hemolysin which can produce, and they are pandemic strains. So that is a very alarming situation wherein you can find even pandemic strains present in fishes. And then in this case, we couldn't find any lesion in the shrimp or the fish from which we have isolated. So that means it is very much prevalent in the environment. So this is not a very good information. But then, so this is what we are reporting. Okay, so again, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, we were able to trace. So what we did is that I think somebody's mic is on. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Bhargav KS. Please mute your microphone. I'm trying to mute, but you are.
Hello.
Sir, please continue.
Yeah. So here in this case, we have found that the methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus Yes. So we try to taste the contamination. We try to taste. Hello. Yeah. So we try to trace the contamination. We found that the MRSA which was present in the landing site, that was carried over to a retail market. So that means from the landing side, you can see that the MRSA, because we try to do it with spot typing. It's a typing method which is used to differentiate different strains of MRSA, which otherwise cannot be differentiated. So we found that the MRSA which is prevalent in a landing site was the same spot type was prevalent in the retail market. So probably we can see that the MRSA has been transmitted from one place to other. So that means there is a transfer of the different clones of MRSA from one place to other. So that means that there's every probability that this MRSA gets spread from one place to other, depending on how the fish moves from one place to other. So as all of us know, Staphylococcus aureus is not a real fish pathogen, but it might have got contaminated from a human source, and then it is entered into the seafood, and from there it is getting transmitted to different places. So this is again a PhD work of Dr. Murugadas we have done. Also, we were able to find out STEC, or the enterohemorrhagic E. coli, in a shrimp sample, which we have collected some time back. This was again a PhD work which was done in 2009, and it is one of the major cause of illnesses in US. You can see that around 1 lakh people have been infected in US, and then around 90 deaths has been there. So this has been found to be present in the retail shrimp samples, which in Kochi. So this is another study which we did. This is again another PhD work. So what we found is that the Aeromonas species, they are also the Aeromonas species. They tend to grow inside the tissue of the fish. So they are spoilage bacteria in fishes. So one of the spoilage organisms, spoilage flora, because when you store the bacteria, store the fish under refrigerated condition, the Aeromonas will tend to grow inside the fish. And we found that when it is stored under modified atmosphere or vacuum package atmosphere, it tend to grow because, and then we found that many of these species are pathogenic in human beings. So that means when stored in refrigerated conditions, many of the Aeromonas species which is present in the fish tend to be pathogenic. But it is commonly present in the water bodies, so we need not worry. But then the thing is, when you store at refrigerated conditions, it is found to multiply in the fish, in the seafood. This is again another work which we have done some time back. So we found that Clostridium botulinum is present in the fresh and the cured fish in retail market in Kochi, especially Clostridium botulinum E, type E, and type B. Type E is always present in the aquatic environment, and type B is present in the soil samples. And so, we based on this study, we took up another work, another funded project under DBT, and we found that 10% of the fish which is sold in India, including the canned foods, were found to have Clostridium botulinum in them. But the good thing was that almost all the samples, not almost all the samples didn't have the toxins in them, because this is an intoxication, because the bacteria has to multiply there and then it has to produce a toxin, and once you consume the fish, the seafood, then it produces a symptom. This is very important from the point of view of food poisoning, because why I am telling you is that I'll tell you an instance wherein one of my friends happened to take canned seafood, and then what he found is that the canned seafood, once he took, he had severe illness, and later on it was found that it was because of botulinum toxin, and then he was almost on the verge of death, and then some doctor could diagnose it, and then he was brought back. And I think it took almost 6 months for him to recover, because it's basically a paralysis. I mean, the symptoms are mostly paralytic, and it's a neurotoxin, so it's basically a paralytical toxin. And it took a lot of time for him to recover from that and come back to the normal work and all. So this is very important from the point of view. This is very important, especially when you take convenience products, when you take canned foods. So please see that you take canned foods only from reputed companies where they follow all protocols. Otherwise, there is every chance that we are asking for danger. Also, we found that salmonella is present in very high numbers in seafood. This is a work done in 2009, I think, 2008. And we found that 23% of the seafood samples were harboring salmonella. And recently, one of our PhD students are doing work, and she found that 45% of the seafoods in Kochi was found to harbor salmonella. And we did a serotyping, and we found that most of them are pathogenic to human beings. They belong to paratyphic group. And so this is a major pathogen which has been recognized. But one of the issues which we face with all this is that we don't have a data on infection which is happening in our country, because we don't normally have a epidemiological data on all this. So in US, there is around 1.2 million illness and 450 deaths annually, which happens due to salmonella. Again, this is another work which we did on listeria. This was published recently, I think it was 2018 or 19. And we found that listeria, even listeria is present in very low numbers, but then 1 to 2% it is present in the seafood and also in the ice, which we use for preserving the seafood. So one of the problems with listeria is that listeria can grow at very low temperatures. So even under ice conditions, listeria can grow. And also we started a study in Veraval also. We found the presence of listeria in seafood, which is from our from our waters. I think I've closed my time. How much time can I take? Dr. Ishad or?
Sir, it's almost 1 hour, sir. Can you wind up, sir? Yeah.
I'll go fast. Maybe another 5-10 slides, but I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is about ciguatorotoxin. Ciguatorotoxin is one of the toxins which is found in fish, and there are a few dinoflagellates which are present, so which will be taken by our fish. Gambia discus toxicus, which is the dinoflagellate which is eaten by the herbivorous fish, and the herbivorous fish is eaten by the carnivore fish. And when we eat that fish which has this dinoflagellate and which contains the ciguatoxin, and then we tend to have symptoms. And this has been reported maybe in Trivandrum sometime back. I think it was in 2009. I think, I don't exactly remember, but then recently only it was reported. I think there are only 2 reports, but then there may be many other things, but might have got undiagnosed. And some of the species of fishes which normally go for it are barracuda, sea bass, grouper, etc. They contribute to this ciguatoxin. So that is one toxin which is commonly been there. So this is one case which we have seen once after I reached here. We found that some people, they took a fish which normally we don't take. In Japan there's a big delicacy known as fugu, which is being taken by Japanese, but then the liver and the ovary, the gonads, they carry this toxin, and it's normally produced by bacteria, the symbiotic bacteria like Pseudomonas vibrio. They produce this, and if you consume this fish, then that can cause severe neurological symptoms. And we found that 5 people, they have taken this fish. This is a sample which we have got. The police brought it here after they consumed the fish, and then within 5 minutes, one of the person died. While on the hospital, he died. So the doctors, even they were astonished, because they had never came across such an instance, and I think there is no instance which is reported in India on the consumption of puffer fish and then causing toxin. And I think 5 people were infected because of the consumption of this. So mostly the toxin will be present in the ovary as well as the liver. And I'll skip all this because, and again, there's another toxin which is normally, which we might have encountered many times, histamine toxicity, which is almost present in scrambled fishes like mahi-mahi, tuna, or mackerel. And again, this is produced by different bacteria. They cleave the histidine and then converted it into histamine, Morganella, Proteus, Klebsiella, etc. And that will produce again different symptoms in humans which consume this. So the few steps while to prevent the symptoms, maybe I have a few slides. I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes. One is we have to keep clean. We have to keep our hands clean. We have to keep the equipments which we use for food preparation clean, the kitchen clean. That is the best way, whether it's an institution or whether it's it's our home. And again, we have to separate the raw and cooked. I mean, wherever possible, if you take something raw, then that should be separated out. And wherever we take as cooked, that should be separated out. And we should not use any things which we use in raw in cooked. So there should be any interchange of equipments or maybe even the boats which we use for handling any of these things. Then, of course, cook thoroughly. I mean, that is the best way to kill any of this. But again, handling is a big issue because whoever handles this fish, they have a chance of getting the infection. And keep food at safe temperatures. One of the issues which we normally face is that most of the refrigerators which we have, they don't maintain the proper temperatures because, you know, Clostridium botulinum can go at temperatures above 3 degrees. So if you grow at, I mean, if you keep your food samples anything above 3 degrees, above 4 degrees, then Clostridium botulinum can go there and produce the neurotoxin. So the refrigerators which we own, they have really be checked before we store anything inside. And thank you for the patient listening. And sorry for overshooting the time.
Thank you very much. Now I invite Chair Dr. P.V.Tresamol. Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Tom Joseph, for the excellent session on the seafood zoonosis. Actually, it was a wonderful and informative session with your vast experience in the field. And I congratulate you for this excellent session. Now it is a time for a discussion. Any participants having any doubts can clear.
Sir, can you withdraw the PPT, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Now students and participants can ask your question directly to sir, or you can type your question in the chat box. Sir, my question is, actually now that aquarium culture is booming up, many shops are increasing and people are now very much fond of aquarium. And in this zoonosis point of view, what is the possibility to contract disease, zoonotic diseases through these pet fishes, aquariums, and also what are the precautions as a public and the aquarium shop owners to take to prevent this zoonosis or zoonotic diseases?
Yeah, there is a lot of chance of acquiring this zoonotic bacteria from aquarium. For example, the Edwardsella tarda, they can be vividly present. The Aeromonas species, they can be vividly present. They are pathogenic to human beings also. So this can mycoplasma. I mean, mycoplasma is present in fishes. So they can all contract disease in maybe as well as the owners of the tanks. So few things what we can raise is maybe whenever we handle, we can use gloves, or especially when you have a wound in our body, because some of these enters to our wounds, Vibrio vulnificus, it enters the wound. And then always see that you wash the hands properly after you handle these pathogens, because normally most of these pathogens take the oral route. So the best thing is to avoid this is to use the gloves, and the second thing is to wash the hands properly. So the personal hygiene is the most important thing as far as preventing the zoonotic diseases are concerned from aquatic fishes.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Harshita. Srikant. Dr. Srikant, you can ask question directly.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Yes.
Good afternoon. While purchasing fish, how to
Can you repeat the question? He is asking how to differentiate between the fresh fish and the spoiled fish, right?
Spoiled fish.
Spoiled fish. Yes.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, because sometimes even I get fooled because of that. Because nowadays, I have seen somewhere, because even they've put artificial eyes in the fishes so that you feel that it is fresh. So few things what you can look into is, one is a gill. You can lift the gills and see whether it is red. So if it is red, the chances are that, because you can't say any of these things, because nowadays they know the tricks of the trade. So they use different techniques to keep it fresh. So one is you lift the gills and see whether it is, because if there is mucus, that means it's spoiled. But if it is very fresh red, so that means it's good fish. You just press the fish, that means, and then you leave, just like, and then if you leave a mark there, if you leave a finger mark there, that means it's spoiled fish. But if it comes back as fast as possible, then that means it's good fish. Again, you look in the eyes. If the eyes are bright, if the eyes are colorless, then that means it is fresh fish. But if the eyes are red, if the eyes are sunken, that means it is not fresh fish. But the thing is, most of the time we may not get time for looking into all this, because. But again, the thing is that many times what the customer asks, we will get it, because if you are aware of all these things, if you ask our maybe the trader many times about this, you ask about the quality of the fish, maybe definitely he will also be forced to keep good quality fish. But as I was telling, it is sometimes very difficult to find out the fresh fish and the spoiled fish.
Dr. Tom?
Yeah.
Yes. I have a doubt that now we are hearing more about that formalized fish.
Yeah.
And what is the main criteria? How to identify this formalized, whether it is formalized?
Yeah, actually, CFT has come out with a kit which can detect formalin in formalized fishes. So what you can do is, it's a strip test. So you just press the strip against the fish and then wait for 1 or 2 minutes. I don't know exactly, but then if you wait, then there is a change of color. That means formalin is present in the fish. So that is one of the easiest methods, because that doesn't require any lab. But then that is not a sure shot test. Even if you find it, for a consumer, that is okay. But from a regulatory point of view, we have to take that fish and then we have to further analyze with LC or HPLC and then confirm it before we say that it is positive for formalin, presence of formalin. But otherwise, from a customer point of view, yeah, definitely the kit will be the best thing to use.
Sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir, which are the zoonotic
diseases associated with fish often neglected?
See, the thing is, as I was telling, we don't have any data. So really, as long as we don't have any data, we can't really say whether, whether it's present in our population or not. But definitely, I feel Salmonella, E. coli, pathogenic E. coli, Clostridium botulinum even, this may be the major pathogens which is present, which can really create havoc among us. But we tend to, maybe we tend to underdiagnose it, or maybe we don't diagnose it properly. So normally what happens, we have a food poisoning. So what we normally do, we go to a doctor, and we tell that, okay, we have diarrhea. Sometimes veterinarians, us veterinarians, we do self-diagnosis and self-treatment. But otherwise, normally people, what they do is they go to a doctor, and then the doctor, neither we want a diagnosis, nor he will go for a diagnosis. So he'll immediately prescribe an antibiotic, and based on our symptoms, he'll diagnose different medicines. So we tend to maybe underestimate the presence of, because I was just showing the data, we have just 32 outbreaks in the last 26 years. So that means we are grossly underreporting the presence of these pathogens. But I'm sure that this is up there, because whenever you go to a restaurant, whenever we eat food, we tend to get an infection. So definitely it is there in our environment, but we tend to underestimate it.
Dr. Hema Andrews, can you ask directly? Dr. Hema?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please. Please, Dr. Hema.
Hello, sir. First of all, thank you very much for the informative section. Sir, can you please explain about the relevance of extended spectrum beta-lactamase or carbopinamase producing Enterobacteriaceae in seafood?
I think one of my colleagues is working. He said to come out with a paper on that. But what I understand is ESBL is prevalent, very much prevalent in seafood. But since we don't have any data, because I don't have any data in my hand, so I don't really know the prevalence of. But it is there. It is there, because in our research meetings and all, he used to present about it. So hopefully, if you really want the data, maybe I can get for you. I can get it for you. But if you ask, I don't have the data, but it's there.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is there any more question?
Sir, morning, sir. I'm Dr.
Good
Sujata
morning.
Singh. Sir, thank you, sir, for presenting very nice presentation.
Thank
sir,
you.
just I want to know that seafood toxins, how will you diagnosing for that? Is there any kits are provided, or we are doing something that aspect?
See, for ciguatera or any of those seafood toxins, tetrodotoxin, we have critical instruments to detect the presence. But then, these are all in emergency cases. We cannot wait till when the results come. And there is no treatment also as such, because for tetrodotoxin or ciguatera, or you take any of the toxins which is present in the fish, there is no treatment available. So basically, it's based on the symptom. So it's a symptomatic treatment. If you take ciguatera or pufferfish poisoning, so pufferfish poisoning, what we had, tetrodotoxin, what we have here, they had. So one of the person who died, he had respiratory failure. So RUST4, they were put on respiratory support. So, and they on respiratory support for almost 8 hours. So once they were able to breathe by themselves, then the respiratory support was removed. So only symptomatic treatment is possible. Sometimes some of the they say that use of atropine, parasympathetic, I'm not sure about it, but then, okay, I think it's parasympathetic. So use that. That will take away the symptoms. But basically, these are based on the symptoms. But sometimes what happens is we don't diagnose it at all because we don't link it, because sometimes ciguatera-toxins or maybe toxin, they may be very mild. And ciguatera-toxin doesn't cause, most of the time it doesn't cause any mortality. So you don't really feel it. So the diagnosis mostly when you take the history, if the doctor is smart enough, when you take the history, when you have a history of taking fish, then that's how diagnosis come. Otherwise, it's not diagnosed. Because I have seen many of these cases, even allergic to shrimp, it is very common. I won't say very common, but at least I know at least 2-3 people in our establishment, in our institute itself, who are allergic to shrimps. So these things are, it's not uncommon. I have seen people be affected with toxins, combat poisoning. So these are very common things, but then sometimes what happens is it goes undetected or diagnosed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome.
Nisha P, can you ask directly?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
What is the zebrafish is used as a laboratory animal? Whether any zoonotic disease is there which is associated with it?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sir, zebrafish nowadays used as a laboratory animal. Do we have any zoonotic diseases which are associated with the use of that fish?
Dr. Ishad, could you hear it?
Sir, zebrafish, which is used as laboratory animal, is having any zoonotic importance like that? Any disease associated with the zebrafish?
See, as I was telling earlier, similarly like aquarium fishes, you can have mycoplasma, you can have pheromonas, you can have Edwards letter, many of these you can have. I'll tell you a story. Probiotics is nowadays very widely used in, it's not related to this, but still I'm telling, probiotics is very widely used in aquaculture. It's a big market. I think the market is around more than 1,000 crores, which is a huge market for aquaculture probiotics. So we had a project on aquaculture probiotics. So what happens is whenever the person who was working with that probiotic, when a particular batch of probiotic was opened, within 1 or 2 days, she used to get a lot of pimples. So then, we didn't connect these two. But later on, what happened is we did a next generation sequencing study of these probiotic, because we did a traditional microbiological method, where we couldn't find anything unusual. But when we did a next generation sequencing study, we found the presence of Propionibacterium acne. So Propionibacterium acne produces acne in human beings. So sometimes we miss the infection. Sometimes the infections may be very mild, so that maybe just a fever, a very slight fever, which we tend to ignore. We may take some paracetamol, and sometimes many of these cases it's self-limiting, except maybe cases like salmonella, especially typhoid, or maybe Clostridium botulinum, or maybe ciguatera, pufferfish poisoning. Except that, most of these cases, what happens is, I'm not belittling it, but then most of the cases, what happens is the infections are self-limiting, or maybe it may go off with a few medications. But you can really, because sometimes what happens is when you are immunocompromised, when you have some other infection there, when you have a viral infection, there's every chance that it can flare up. So, yeah, zebrafish definitely, it too has can carry many of these pathogens. So the best thing is you screen for the presence of the pathogens, which and then you can find out. It's not a big thing.